G'day everyone, welcome to the How to Halo Reach ODST web series. This is of course tutorial part 1. My name's Andrew DFT, and in this web series I'm going to be teaching you how to make this exact ODST standing right next to me. All the templates have been designed myself, and they are the exact templates that I used on my own personal costume. So if you're wanting to make this web series a hell of a lot easier for you, I highly recommend buying and downloading my PDF/ebook that is associated with this web series and was created especially for this web series. It contains all the templates ready to go, all scaled, ready to be straight off and printed, where you'll follow the videos accordingly. It also contains a lot of information on what materials you'll be using for this web series, so you don't have to go out and figure that out on your own. The best part about it is it's only $3.50. That's a very small and cheap price for such an amazing amount of material, as well as you're probably going to be spending about $80 to $90 on the costume in general, the overall price. So it's not a little bad contribution to help out me as an artist and help me create more content like this in the future. So let's jump right in. This part 1 is about the helmet. So the helmet I've done is of course from my own templates, which will turn out like this one here. Hey! This is the ODST helmet that will come from the templates. It's not a bad design. I had to kind of find a sacrifice in detail to give you guys a nice, easy design that you can build yourselves. And for most part, it looks pretty damn cool. Yeah. So in terms of difficulty, I would rate this build today about a 3 out of 10. It's actually an extremely easy build to make this helmet, so definitely highly recommend you give it a few attempts, because you'll definitely get better each time you've made it. This is actually the second one out of the 2 I've used for my template personally. This of course being the first, so now I have 2 ODST helmets with 2 separate colored visors, so why not make a collection for yourself while you're at it? But enough talk, let's jump straight into the tutorial. So to kick things off, go ahead and print out the 4 templates that you'll need for this helmet design. Once you've got those templates printed out, you can then go ahead and cut them out with a pair of scissors. Nothing crazy, just a general pair of scissors. Then once you've got everything cut out, we can then go ahead and start transferring it onto the EVA foam. Now when doing this, there are 3 pieces that you will need to take note of, and those are the 3 that are flashing on screen at the moment. You want to make sure that these 3 pieces are joint, not individual, but joint. As you can see, I've linked them together so they are one full piece. Then go ahead and grab your nice sharp craft blade and cut out all the individual pieces nicely. Once you have them all cut out, we can then start building on the helmet. So go put all those in a nice safe place, because you will be using every piece in this tutorial. So to start us off, go ahead and grab the 2 pieces you can see on screen. What we're going to do is we're going to grab some hot glue and we're going to join these 2 pieces together, just to create a nice little seam, nothing too drastic. Once those have set, you can then grab the heat gun and start heating up the side panels. You don't want to heat up where we've just glued, as of course that seam will break and it will be of no use to us. So go ahead and heat up those sides until they become malleable, and then bend them around, trying to keep the symmetry as best as you can. Of course we are freehanding this, or whatever you want to call it, so there might be some odd altercations or some non-symmetrical pieces, but at the end of the day it should look 90% symmetrical. Once you've heated up both these sides, we can then grab the hot glue again and join them together, getting a nice seam if you can. And once those are done, you can then have that nice circle and we can build on the rest of the helmet from it. So the next piece we'll do is we'll grab the back, I don't know what you'd call it, the neck brace sort of thing, I guess. And what you can do is it should just fit straight into position, so get some hot glue on one of the sides, glue that into position, and once that's set, you can then work your way around the remaining ring. Now let's start working on some details. So we'll grab the lower chin piece, and you can see we've got these 3 arches. Grab some scissors and cut out this center arch and have it looking like this. What we're then going to do is we're going to place it on the actual design itself. Now of course you will realize instantly, and I'm showing you on the film, it doesn't fit. That is just because of the thickness of the foam. When we bent it, it's not going to work. So what we do is bring in maybe ½ an inch. That way it takes into account of the depth. So therefore your design can be transferred dead smack in the middle, and it should look quite symmetrical. Now what you want to do is you want to cut that out. Now I highly recommend not cutting how I'm doing it on screen. This was a very ineffective and inefficient way to do it, but it was the only way I could show you on camera. So please don't copy how I'm doing it. Do it in a way that is safe and a bit more efficient. Once you've done that, nonetheless, go ahead and grab this extra bit and jump onto the beveling board. You don't have to have a beveling board. I've just got it here because I didn't want to carve up my nice new cutting mat. What you're going to do is you're going to bevel in an edge, 45 degrees or so. It doesn't really matter, just enough that it will allow us to place this into the helmet without having any of those edges protruding. Now what I mean by that is, you can see here, it should fit in perfectly, nice and flush, nice and snug, whatever term you want to use. You can then just hot glue it straight into position and it should fit in nicely. Now one thing you will notice is that because we've bent the foam, we've got this kind of abnormal effect happening, this kind of mutation. But don't worry, that has been taken into account. All we're going to do is add a nice horizontal line, a symmetrical horizontal line I might add, to the helmet, so that way we can cut that straight off or shave it straight off, so that way it doesn't exist anymore and it doesn't leave any horrible mark, so that way our helmet is nice and clean and we can continue with the extra design. So don't forget that. It's a pretty key piece of information. On to the next piece. Now this is going to be the side bridge, or the thing that pretty much is where the visor will sit. We don't need it to be this thick. It'd look a bit strange if it was left this thick. So what you want to do is do your best, take your time and cut it in half. So that way we've got a nice kind of thin piece of foam that will go up next to the visor. Now one thing you might realize is it might not fit perfectly. That's just in the way we're using the foam. Because we're bending it, it's never going to be 100% the same to your one or to anyone else that's doing this. So if it does come up a bit short, all you need to do is cut off the excess once you've ruled it out and then put it into position. Nothing too hard. That is one thing you will have to rely on with working with foam, especially in these templates, is the way I build it might be a slight difference to how you build it. Therefore the template might not fit in 100%, but it will just be a slight change or slight cutting off an excess millimeter or so to make it fit perfectly. Now let's work our way up the helmet. So we're going to grab these two nice little pieces and we're going to go ahead and heat them up with our heat gun. Now we don't want to heat them up too much, just enough that it gives it a nice kind of malleable bend, so we can give it a nice little arch and dome-like effect. Nothing too extreme, just enough to break it from its nice flat surface and into a dome effect, which will allow it just to slot perfectly into place on a leveled effect. Now you will see that this is leveling up. This is just how the design is done and how I've taken it into account when writing the templates. So I advise you do it like I've done here and given it that nice kind of outward level. And it will stand out quite effectively when we go ahead and do this next piece here, which we will follow the exact same steps. But before we jump into that, we do have to do something different. We have to jump on that beveling board and bevel the far side. Why? You will find out in a second. It will just allow the top of the helmet to kind of sit a lot nicer with the final helmet when we bring it all together. Once you've done that bevel, you can go ahead and heat it up like you did with the previous piece. Give it that nice kind of bend and dome arch look, and then glue it into place. I recommend gluing the base of the end first. That way you know it's set in place, so you can bend it all the way over and give it that nice internal level. As you can see, I was talking about the previous piece, how it's on the outside. This one is now more on the interior and will then connect to the helmet. To put the final top layer on, we are going to have to do a few things, and it might be a bit tricky. But first off, we'll just go through the general process. What we're going to do is we're going to bevel the two sides to this long slab of foam. Nothing too drastic when you're beveling in, just pretty much what you've been doing before, 45-degree angles on the interior. And then what you can do is you can grab your heat gun and we can start heating up the foam. We are going to be giving it a nice kind of domed effect. So the way I did this is either you can bend it over your knee or your thigh or a rugby or soccer ball, football ball, whatever you wish, or you can just push it in like I am here, which will give you the effect you want. But if you do use an already smoothed object to bend it over, it will give you a far nicer curve. Then what we can do is, using those two edges, the ones that have both been beveled, you should be able to kind of put your two pieces together and have them sit flush. Now of course you're going to want to hot glue at least 3/4 all the way down. But what you will notice, and what I'm showing you here on the video, is that we've got this large excess which we don't need. The reason I put this in here is just as a safety, of course, in case you guys cut too far or you didn't have enough room to work with. This will allow us to bring it back. So all you need to do is bring in the extra sides like I'm doing here, and then cut off the excess in accordance to wherever the helmet is ending for you. As you can see here, I'm just slowly trimming off that edge to bring it in and make sure it sits nicely with where that line is already sitting. And then all you need to do is go hot glue it into position. And that should conclude the back piece of the helmet. Just so we can have a nice, good looking helmet, we're going to go ahead and cut off this little extra piece which is kind of protruding from the design. So all you need to do is just jump in and bevel it, cut off that little edge so that way it's more flush with the sides of this helmet. Nothing too crazy, but it will add a lot to the end. Now for the side panels. This is where it gets exciting and pretty easy. So what you can do is you can grab those two side panels that you cut out initially and go ahead and heat gun them up. Then they should just slot straight into position with a bit of hot glue, and then you shouldn't have any issues. But that's just one of the kind of like thicknesses that we're going to be doing. We're going to add the second one. Now to do this, we're going to trace the template which you initially used, but we're going to add like 1/2 inch extra to it, just to account for the fact that the foam will be bending over that first layer. Now it might not use that whole 1/2 inch, but it's better to have some excess to cut away than not have enough. It just saves you some money and some time and some foam. So go ahead and hot glue that right over the top, and it should sit nice and flush. Now of course you can see here where that excess is not needed, so just draw in those horizontal and vertical lines and then cut it out. Easy enough. Just slice it right off. Get it out of there. And then you should just be left with a nice looking piece. But it's not done with the detail just yet. What you'll do is go back to the initial template and you're going to cut out this small little design. No idea what it's called, it's just there. Cut out that small design as well as this top little segment. This top little segment can then be used to transfer the exterior and interior lines. This is just going to be a part where we'll bevel to give a nice 3D look in the end. So transfer those across. If you need to bridge that negative gap, just use a straight edge and do so as necessary. Now what we're going to do is grab a nice sharp blade, and please make sure it is a brand new sharp blade because you don't want this to tear. Get my head out of the way. Come on, move. There you go. And you're going to cut straight through and give it this nice look. Now you want to make sure that you are only cutting on that one thickness of foam. You don't want to cut through that second layer, as it might be a bit risky and not look as good, because you don't want to cut over that seam. What we can do is a nice little trick that I always use is to use some hot glue just to fill in that seam, spread it over so it looks a little bit better than what it would have just with an open wound, so to speak. PVA will also be effective in closing that up in the end. So now we can jump to that small little piece of detail that I had no idea what it was actually called, but it is just a small piece of detail. What you're going to do is you can transfer that onto the foam and draw out two new pieces, one for the left side, one for the right side. Not difficult. Then use the template just to mark where it should actually go, and just grab some hot glue and just put it straight into position. No fuss, just straight in there and all done. Now hopefully you still have that original chin template, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut out one of the segments on the side. Doesn't matter which one it is, just cut off one of them. We're going to use this to add some nice bits of detail to the actual helmet. So what you want to do is you want to line it up nicely and then trace in that negative area. Do it on both sides, making sure it's as symmetrical as possible, because you want this to look as good as you possibly can, especially as this is going to be seen pretty much every single photo you take. Once you've drawn in those lines, grab the nice sharp blade and cut this segment out. The reason why we're going to cut it out is because we're going to be putting it there. We're going to be pretty much putting it right back into position, but we're going to be doing it on a negative level. So that way it gives it a more 3D look, I guess. And when you paint this up, it should look rather nice. Now you can either put it on the inside, or you can do it more on the exterior, whatever your choice is. I just prefer doing it like this on the interior, as it kind of just looks greater overall. We now have to add a slight tiny piece of detail which goes just above what our nose bridge would be and our eyesight. This will help hold the visor intact when you build it. So all you're going to do is cut that section in half because we don't need it to be the full thickness that it currently is, and then you're going to glue 90% of it into place, making sure it sits there nice and well, symmetrically, because you want this to look decent. And then what we can do is we can bend those extra pieces off and, well, not off, but to the side, and glue them into position so it should kind of wrap around the bridge of the helmet. And we're getting closer to the end, don't worry, we're nearly there. What you're going to do now is grab these two templates, which of course you had initially, and we're going to cut out that little square piece that you can see in the bottom of it. Then, easy enough, you can transfer it straight onto the helmet itself. It should just slot in perfectly, and you're going to transfer across those two squares into its actual position. Once you've done those, you can then go ahead and cut these pieces out, because what we're going to do, like the little arc thing, cut the pieces in half, and then we're going to add a more internal level just to give it a better 3D design. So slice it in half and hot glue it into position like that. And then of course repeat for the other three pieces, and make sure you do it on the other side as well. But we're not done just yet. We're going to grab that larger piece, the larger template, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut off one of the segments. This segment is going to become the front facade design parts of the helmet, so to speak. And it's easy enough. All you're going to do is place it into position like you did with those little squares, and then just draw in the individual lines. Then of course go and cut out the extra segment, and then draw in that second line, and then repeat on the other side as well. That is quite important. And then we can do pretty much the same process, but for the top segment. Go ahead and cut off that bottom section and then transfer it on. If it doesn't sit 100% right on the tip of the helmet, then you will just have to improvise and kind of extend the lines where need be. Just make sure both sides meet up properly, and then of course do it again to that second line, which will be on the top as well. As for the square thing, we can easily cut that out with a pair of scissors and just put it into place, because pretty much that piece of paper is sitting there holding that position. You should have no issue with just drawing that line in place as so. Yeah, looks pretty good. But what we are now going to do is a nice little EVA foam technique that a lot of people do. Is you're just going to score. You're not going to cut through the foam, you're just going to score it, so just slightly into it. Then what we do is run over it with a heat gun, and what it will do is it will separate those lines out, creating a nice design for us. And then what you can also do is just do it to this little piece of detail, which the ODST helmet actually does have these little nicks on it, so I just thought I'd include them just for you guys to see. Same technique, and it should look pretty decent. Now of course what you can do next is make sure that it actually fits. Add some padding underneath if you want to make it more of a snug fit, and then go of course and add any customization features you wish, whether that be antennas or extra detail or kind of like shield things up the top, whatever you want. And of course make sure you seal it with some PVA glue, wood glue, and then paint it up as you wish. Then of course grab the template from my ebook, which will help give a small little tutorial, which is pretty easy. I don't need a video for it, on how to make the visor. So that's it. I hope you guys managed to follow along and you have your own helmet that can come out in the end and look somewhat nice. Of course this one's just done with a basic paint job and a PVA coating. Now that is all addressed in previous videos I've done, as well as in the ebook itself. So definitely have a nice play around with the customization of what kind of colors you want to go for, and that will all depend on what you kind of want for the overall costume. But hopefully you guys managed to follow along, get that nice ODST looking helmet done, and now you can go off and customize it as you wish. If you feel like your helmet wasn't up to standard, definitely just go repeat the same process again. It will get better over time, I promise you that. Otherwise, I'll see you in part 2, where we work on the chest and then of course work all the way through the other individual tutorials until we get our final ODST costume. Thank you very much for watching guys, and catch you later.